Welcome to episode 2 of Hats Off, guys. I'm sorry it's been a while. It's been almost been a month, but I've had so many things come up in my own personal life and videos. You guys know the Seals videos, the inspiration, Book of Job video. Things just got in the way. Uh, yeah, sorry. I'm sorry. But we're gonna get out a good episode right now. I'm gonna wait a couple of days. I'm gonna do another one. I'm gonna backdoor it before the end of the month. I want two two more Hats Off videos. This one and another one before the end of the month. Get that done quick. Now, we had left off at 1322 AD. 1322 AD was what happened 1322 AD? Oh, okay, yeah, that was when Pope John, yeah, Pope John the 22nd officially banned the Jewish Talmud. Now, by this time in the 14th century AD, the Jews already had a very sophisticated information exchange network all across Europe. They were already networking all kinds of places in Europe to places in the Middle East. As a matter of fact, there wasn't hardly anything going on in all of from Persia, northern Africa, the Mediterranean, all of the Near East, Iraq, Babylon, that whole area of the world, all through Europe, there wasn't anything going on that the Jews didn't have their hands in something. This is the type of information network that they had already established. Now, it wasn't official, but the fact that the Jews were the only culture spread throughout Europe that spoke every single language, Jews spoke every language in the Mediterranean. Yeah, there were these people here. These people here had networked fantastically, and it is the reason why the Muslims were so easily invaded Europe was because of Jewish treachery in hundreds of incidents across Europe, allowing the Muslims to invade, providing disinformation and wrong information to local Christians, Christian rulers. Yeah, all of it was by design. When the Muslims invaded Europe, the Jews were given their choice of women. They literally enslaved people's wives and daughters and took them for their own. And they were given these females and businesses, companies, suitable real estate. They were given all this in exchange for helping with these invasions. So we will continue our hats off series. And some of these events don't have anything to do with Jewish history. They're just things that are going on in other parts of the world, such as 1325. This is really interesting. 1325 uh, in the calendrics is the year 2100. It is 700 years three times over, 2100 years of the Greek Olympiad calendar. The Greeks were black bearded people. Yeah, olive skin, real famous for the olive oil, and the use of a mariner race, and they were also assimilationists. So we find it really interesting that this is the 21st hundred year of the Olympiad calendar, and in the year 1325 Anno Domini, not in Greece but in ancient America, we find the Mexica established Tenochtitlan near modern Mexico City, a renovated city of unknown antiquity, priorly occupied by the Toltecs. For those of you who don't know, the Toltecs were olive skinned with long black beards and black hair. They were not indigenous Native Americans. The Aztecs venerated them, but they weren't related to them at all. The Aztecs could not grow facial hair, and they had dark red skin. So, yeah, uh, we're not going to get into it here. This isn't the place for it, but the Toltecs were the descendants of people from the Mediterranean who had made it to ancient America. And this has been shown by Barry Fell. It's been shown by David Hatcher Childress. It's been shown by many authors who show Phoenician and Cyrene and Cypriot and Libyan inscriptions all throughout the Americas. So this year begins a 153-year countdown to the completion of the multi-ton stone, the relic called the Stone of the Fifth Sun at Tenochtitlan, an ancient It's an ancient American version of the apocalypse, and it's based off the Toltec belief system, which is Phoenician. And remember, in the book of Revelation, what do we have? Which is copied from the Greek Sibylline text, the Greek Sibylline oracles. At the end, we have God returning as a conqueror, not carrying a sword, but a sword protruding from his mouth, meaning the power of speech to harm. But you know what? On the stone of the fifth sun, we have the exact same thing. We have the four corners of the world, earthquakes, volcanoes, plague, and war, and we have all these apocalyptic events that are woven around a God in the middle who comes back at the fifth sun. That God has a blade protruding from his mouth. Yeah, guys, it's all on the Aztec stone of the fifth sun. So this is 1325. It is a Toltec city outside of Mexico City called Tenochtitlan, which has the name of Enoch in the name. Actually, it actually is more accurately rendered the birthplace or the origin of the city of Enoch, Tenochtitlan. Okay, so we move on to the very next year of 1326. This is what was going on in the ancient in America. So in 1326, we return to our events of hats off. In the Kingdom of Castile in Spain, the government allowed the Jews to charge interest on loans at 33.3%. So this is the beginning of the troubles of Spain. The Spanish crown in Castile, not yet Aragon, but the problem would bleed over into Aragon later. In the Kingdom of Castile in Spain, the government allowed the Jews to charge interest on loans. Now, different European governments did this because it brought more money to the treasury, meaning the Jews were allowed to charge usury, but some of that had to go to the crown. It was a business relationship. What got the Jews in trouble over and over and over and over and over and over and over, and there's over 100 different instances in the historical record where the Jews were run out of a country because they didn't pay the piper. They did not render unto Caesar that which was Caesar's. They got caught stiffing the government over and over and over and over. So, okay, in Cuenca, a famine occurred, and the Jews realized how desperate the situation was for the Christians, but they refused to lend out money like they ordinarily did at this time until the government yielded to their demands to allow them to charge 40% interest on all loans. Okay, this is in the book Jewish Supremacism, and I've told you guys you got to read this book. It's fascinating. Page 166, Jewish Supremacism. There's a lot happening in here. There's more to unpack than meets the eye. First of all, in this year, the Jews are allowed to practice usury in the Kingdom of Castile in Spain. That's not enough for them. 33.3% interest isn't enough. It's a famine. People are starving. And the Jews hold out until the crown grants them the right to charge 40%. This means, and can only mean, that the Jewish presence in Spain was so ingrained and powerful that the crown had to yield rather than dispatching knights to go take that shit. The Jews were far more invested in European politics and royalty than one can imagine. You can imagine 100 different scenarios like Epstein Island. The Jews are providing. You gotta understand, at this time in history, remember the movie Amistad? Listen, that shit's real. The Jews were in control of the skin trade. They sold little girls and boys. The Talmud allowed them. It even encouraged that behavior. They sold children. So, this is yeah, for the Spanish crown to yield means that they had power over the nobility, and that's saying something. Yeah, the Jewish control over the Western world started centuries ago, not just recently, but it got them in trouble, as we'll see. So, what's interesting about this famine that affects the Christian world but doesn't affect the Jewish world, the Jews get their way, and then they get their way again, and there's a loss of face to the Spanish crown. All in this one year of 1326. But the calendrics are phenomenal because the Christian populations of Europe are descended from an ancient people, the Sethites, through 10 different tribes of people that came from the Middle East that all carried this history. These Sethites had built a monument called the Great Pyramid before the flood. They had followed the ideas and the architectural designs of a benefactor, and they built this structure. And in this year of 1326, it is exactly 4,140 years Anno Pyramid since the pyramid was completed. This is 414 years, a cursed earth period times 10. 10 is the number of completion. So here we have in 1326, something happened here that's profoundly affecting Europe and the Jews. A timeline has ended in this year, which means something can happen now. It's all, remember the statements in the Old Testament where different nations, like people were praying to God, hey man, when are you gonna put the hammer of judgment on these Amorites? And then God would respond through a prophet, be patient, keep doing what you're doing. The sins of the Amorites are not yet full. And it always be shown as a cup or a bowl that had liquid. The liquid was wine, and as long as the wine wasn't yet spilling out, the sins weren't filling the cup. This is the imagery we are also given in the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, it specifically says that the last 7 plagues are 7 bowls of wrath that have filled up with the sins of the world, and they're poured back on the earth. Same imagery applies. So this is a massive isometric projection because 4,140 years since the completion of the pyramid by the Sethites was 2070 years. That's exactly half of 4140. It's 2070 years since Israel and Judah split up, since the 10 tribes broke away from Judah and Benjamin and basically told them to fuck off. We don't care about Yahweh. We don't give a damn about that demon out of a burning bush. We're tired of your BS. And they went back and they continued to do what they had always done because the Israelites were a people who were under a different covenant and they were under a different type of religious system and worship. They never yielded to the small little insignificant city of Jerusalem, which later became Jerusalem. They had always gone to worship at Kadesh in northern Syria. So huge isometric projection here. 2070 years after the Great Pyramid is complete, which is the symbol of Israelite descended peoples. All Israelite descended peoples have as their symbol the Great Pyramid. Now, the Phoenicians knew this, the Carthaginians knew this, the Etruscans knew this. This is why they had amulets that they hung around their neck that always had a little pyramid with a smiley face. Do your homework. You'll find some pretty unique jewelry from the ancient past. But that's what they had throughout the Mediterranean. People who knew that they were descended from the Sethites that built the Great Pyramid, and that the Great Pyramid was a promise of the return of God to earth, the chief cornerstone. They used to wear amulets and rings and bracelets that had a little triangle with a smiley face on it. Sometimes you could even see the bricks behind the smiley face. So, this isometric projection was 2070 years. This is all divisible by 138, the Phoenix number, all the way to this year of 1326. So, we have 2 different peoples before the flood in conflict. One of them is taking over. They got the 7 kings of the Anunnaki. They're taking over control. They're taking over everything, all the financial districts, all the manufacturing districts. But you got a holy people who are building this structure, and They used their resources to do it. They did it quietly. No one knows why they did it. And then 70 years later, the descendants of those people finally break apart. They're having no more kinship at all. Later, 10 tribes go into captivity, and they end up going through the Caucasus Mountains. They go through the Mediterranean in waves, and in wave after wave after wave after wave, they start populating all the islands and coasts of the earth, going different continents, all over Europe, all over the UK, all over Ireland, all over North America, Central America, South America, all over the North African coasts. We have traced their migrations in Chronicon. It's all there for you to read if you just download the PDFs. So, this is 1326. Again, we have the descendants of the Israelites and the Jews are right here. The Jews are still Jewish. They haven't changed a bit. But in fulfillment to Old Testament prophecies, the people of Israel had forgotten who they were. They were told this. It is specifically prophesied in the Old Testament that the descendants of Israel would forget their name. They don't even know that they have an ancient enemy in the Jews. And here they are right here, subject to the Jews again, in usury and taxes and all that. So, not only is this a massive isometric projection spanning 4,140 years, but it's also the 800th year of the Anno Domini calendar. 800 is the number of new beginnings, 8 times 100. So we have something new about to start happening here. So we're leaving 1326. And just a couple years later, in 1331, we have two events that would later take on some major significance. A comet appears in the skies. We don't have any historical records that it really did anything, but at that time, people feared the comet, and they also feared the Turk. And Christian prayers back then used to open up, "Dear Lord, please save us from the comets and the Turks." Yeah, this is a very common Christian prayer back in the day. Matter of fact, you can read that in Gods of Eden by William Brambley. He cites those old texts. So, 1331, this comet appears at the birth of Tamerlane in Turkmenistan, or Turkestan. So some of you know who Tamerlane is. So Tamerlane is one of the greatest of the Khans. And there was a lot of networking going on with the Khans as well. It was the Christians were always left in the dark. The Jews were communicating with everybody. They knew the movements. They knew what was going on. They knew when to pull their resources out of a certain community because it was about to get invaded by Mongols and Khans that did not have any agreements with the Jews. And they knew when to keep their assets in place and to stay there and to help invading Muslims because when the Islamic forces would come in and set up shop and take over the citadels and the castles, then they would be able to go to the slave auctions and the Jews would be able to get whatever girls, young boys, and women that they wanted. They would get first pick for helping the enemies. The Christians, European Christians, always had it the worst. Always had it the worst. Always the last to know. Always getting invaded. This treachery went on for centuries. Centuries. It was literally an information war, and the Jews had all the information. That was 1326. Excuse me. That was 1331. So only 2 years after the appearance of that comet, we have. In 1333, we have a meteorite seen by hundreds of thousands of people. This thing crosses the sky in the ancient East, China, and it hits the ground. So everything within a 100-mile radius died. This is in 1333, and they didn't die from the impact. This thing flew across the sky, crashed into the ground, and everything in a 100-mile radius died of noxious gases that came from this detonation. So there were strange omens seen in the skies both over China, and the Mongol Emperor Togon Temurkhan ascends the throne and initiates a practice involving Buddhist tantric exercises turned into full-blown orgies, summoning Chinese women from the low classes and the nobility. You know, this pissed the Chinese off. So Chinese historians recorded that earthquakes occurred, weird storms, with even entire mountains disappearing into the sea in 1333, in the same year that this object fell from the sky and poisoned a 100-mile radius. It's crazy. Entire villages vanished into the ground. Mount Etna in Sicily erupted, and historians agree that these events in China were also occurring in other regions of the world. The problem is, in the 14th century, in the 1300s, there wasn't very many people recording anything. Writing was done exclusively by the nobility, by the scribes, and by the Jews. So, this was 1333. Terrible time to live. 1336. Extraordinary thunderstorms, these are unusual thunderstorms, are reported over northern France. They may not have been ordinary at all, because this is the 1380th year of the Roman Julian calendar. 138 times 10, a phoenix number. So this could be phoenix phenomenon related. So in the year 1337, this is the 2112th year of the Greek Olympiad system. That is a palindrome. So a comet is recorded by Europeans in June. The English contend with the French over English claims to the French throne, beginning what is known as the 100 Years' War. It actually lasted 116 years, till the year 1453. It's very interesting that the war between the French and the English over domination, who's going to rule, ended in 1453, the same year that Jews helped the Turks take the Christian capital of Constantinople. We'll get to that though. We haven't got that far yet. So, this is the atypical contention between the firstborn son and the adopted sons of the birthright. This is like the prophecy of Manasseh and Ephraim playing out here. The two that were adopted into the family of Israel. They didn't belong. They were actually born in Egypt through Joseph. So, but that's some Dankenbrink material there. You got to read William Dankenbrink. If none of you have heard of his books, you need to look up The United States and Britain in Prophecy by William Dankenbrink. The book will blow your mind. It's huge, it's big, but it will blow your mind, showing you how to prophetically identify all the nations in the world, who plays what roles, and how to prove it. It's awesome. So in the year 1338, German princes met at Rheims and formally revoked the right of the Pope to choose a German king. Those Germans have always been in rebellion against the Pope. They have always fucked over that Pope. I mean, not that he didn't need a good screwing, but I'm just saying, they always rebelling. We'll get to that too, because we got a lot of stuff to cover about how the Germans just didn't care. They didn't care about the Pope and didn't care about the Jews. So, this was the 800th year from the rise of the papacy in 538 AD. So, in exactly the 800th year since the papacy was formed in the year 538, wow, that's interesting. That's after the Great Reset of 522, when the Anno Domini calendar was created in 526. The papacy didn't come into existence until after the new Anno Domini calendar? Wow. Jason can learn too, guys. Wow. That gives even more significance to the fact that Dionysius changed the calendar from the Phoenix calendar of 552 years that marked the year 520, that would have been 522 AD, Wow. Okay, so the papacy. Okay, this is the 800th year of the papacy, which was formed during the Justinian plagues in 538 AD. That's amazing. I learned something. 800 is a number of new beginnings. Why is 8 the number of new beginnings? Listen, the numerical counting systems from the ancient world went by sevens. They counted in sevens. You know, a jubilee is 7 sevens, and then one break of a year where the fields lay fallow to make the 50th year. That's a jubilee. 7 times 7 plus 1. But a week is 7 days. However, the 8th day is actually the first of a whole new pattern of 7 days. Therefore, the 8 was represented as a infinity symbol that had no beginning and no end, because technically 8 was always the first of the next 7, and when you got to 8 again, it's really just number 1 of the next 7, and when you got to 8 again, it's really just number 1 of the next 7, ad infinitum. It never ends. 8 became the number to mystics and in the Kabbalah, representing the number of new beginnings. What's the new beginning here? That the Germans weren't taking that papal bullshit. That's the new beginning right here. The Germans decided to revoke the right of the Pope to choose a German king. That's a new beginning for the Pope, right there. So we move on to 1342. In the year 1342, not much happens, but the Germans and French report that there is massive flooding throughout Europe. This is a really destructive period of time, and it's just getting started. We're about to see. We're about to see. You've seen that movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail? We're about to enter that period right here. Remember that dude with that bell pushing that cart full of dead bodies? Bring out your dead. Bring out your dead. And the dude pops up, the old man pops up, says, excuse me, sir, but I'm not dead yet. And he takes that hammer and hits that dude in the head, make sure he's dead. Yeah. We're about to enter that period right here in this presentation. So we get to 1342. There's massive flooding reported by the Germans and the French throughout Europe. And 2 years later, in the year 1344 AD, which is 1656 of the Greek Syrian Seleucid calendar. This is 138. This is on the 138 year timeline of Phoenix. It is 868 years from the fall of Rome. We don't really talk about this a lot, but 868 is 434 times 4, plus 434. And in Chronicon, you'll see over and over that 434 years was a unit of judged time. It meant the judgment for something was about to happen or it was over. So this is 2 judged periods. Now, if you don't think the calendrics are important for this year, this is the year 1080. This is the Israelite number, a Great Pyramid number, 1080, 108 times 10. This is the number 1080 for the Egyptian Coptic calendar, which is 1656 Greek Seleucid calendar. So we have 2 major calendars converging with 2 epic numbers for this year. So what happened in this year? You know, calendars are timekeeping systems. Timekeeping systems control us. Remember, I told you guys many times, our holography is the way we interpret the chains that bind the construct. From the inside, we see these as calendars. What happened in 1344? Well, the very first clock dial was invented by Jacobi de Donde of Chioggia, Italy. This was a mechanical device for computing time that visibly allowed one to see the time of day or the time of night. This was a revolutionary concept. Now, almost 7 centuries later, we still use clock dials. We still use them today. Where's my watch at? I don't have it in here. We still use clock dials on our watches and on the walls. Nothing's changed since then. In this year, check this out, in this year related to Earth time, the timing being 1344 Anno Domini, is significant because the number 1344 is 792, Nemesis X number, and 552 added together. Nemesis X and Phoenix. Phoenix is the keeper of the calendar. Nemesis X is what fucks it up. Here it is right here, guys. It's all in this year. These are the periodic links of both the Nemesis X object and the Phoenix phenomenon. It's crazy because this is also 552 years times 3 of the Greek Seleucid calendar. All of this, it's amazing, guys. Earth time is based off of the ancient Sumerian sexagesimal system, a base 6 and base 60 system, the origin of our 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 24-hour days, and all that. So, what's interesting is mankind was cursed in the year 1344. 1344. Anunnaki reckoning, which began in 5239 BC. Do you know what you really know that date as? 1344 Anunnaki reckoning is the exact date of 3895 BC, the Adam and Eve reset, the fall of man, caused by the Phoenix on its 138-year periodicity. Every bit of this. In this 1 year, we have an intersect of multiple different timekeeping systems, all referencing major mooring nodal events in the ancient past. Yeah, guys, this is amazing. It's amazing stuff. I know many of you see what I'm seeing here. So these nodal dates, these are fascinating. And it just so happens when all these calendars converge at this time, and involving both Nemesis X and the Phoenix, it just so happens that this massive giant clock was built and was made and implemented this year, and it lasted for centuries turning in this year. A clock is what? A clock is a visual representation of the mechanics of a calendar. So, the data for the year 1344 about the clock and all that happens to come from a Jewish source too. His name is Daniel Boorstin. He wrote a book called The Discoverers. Actually, it's a really good book. It's a big, huge book. But Daniel Boorstin wrote that. So in the very next year, 1345, we have my boy here, Lewis Mumford, from the 20th century, a historian and author of the book Technics and Civilization. I've quoted this book many times. Wrote that in this year, Western civilization in Europe began dividing the day into hours of 60 minutes and 60 seconds each. This was the result of the invention of the year before, the ability of men to see time unfolding through the clock dial invention. Do you see how important those calendars were of the year before and the implementation of that clock? Here it is right here. Not even knowing anything about the synchronicities that I just told you about, knowing nothing about Nemesis X or Phoenix or how they aligned on this day, knowing nothing about the calendrical alignments of the Greek Seleucid calendar and the Christian Coptic calendar and the fall of Rome countdown, knowing none of these events, knowing nothing about the connection through time space to 3895 BC, fall of man, year 1 of the Annus Mundi calendar, knowing nothing about the 1344 year countdown of the Anunnaki system to that year, knowing nothing about any of these synchronicities. Lewis Mumford in Technics and Civilization published that within a year of the invention of the clock in this year, Western civilization began separating our own world into 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 24 hours. We started doing the very thing that was done before the flood. We started regarding time in a mechanical fashion. So this is what it says right here. That's what we did. We essentially resurrected ancient Sumerian practice. That's on page 16 of the book Technics and Civilization from like 1919. It's an old book, 1920, 1919, something like that. An oldie but a goodie. So we're moving on, and we get to the fateful year of 1346. Much of the events of 1346 continued to bleed over into 1347. This is not. This is a terrible year. Both years are awful. A column of fire is seen over the country of France. It is visible in the sky for some time. In China, the Near East, ancient Near East, all through India, moving rapidly, the Great Black Death Plague, the bubonic plague, began decimating the world's population. Within a 4-year period, 1/3 of the entire world was dead. And it wasn't an ordinary death, it was a very long, agonizing, slow death as people's avatars literally fell apart. Now, it was widely assumed by many of the time that the culprit for the plague was comets. Comets. Modern historians are going to tell you it was rats from China, but that's not the story we have from antiquity. Pope Clement estimated that about 23 million people died from the plague in Asia outside of China and India. The Black Death entered Syria and the Near East, where entire communities were laid waste. Philosopher-historian Manly P. Hall wrote that it was popular in those days for European Christians to pray to God to keep them safe from the plague, the Turk, and the comets. The malady was called the Black Death because of the dark purple color of the victim's skin in the final stage of the disease. C.W. Dalton in The World's All Wrong. I've talked about this book before. People have been telling me I know it's hard to get because I read one of the final copies that were off the press, and there was never a second print run. The book is huge. It's a big hardback blue book, but if you can find it in a thrift store, buy that book. The World's All Wrong, and Everybody Knows It, by C.W. Dalton. He wrote it in the 80s. The Black Death of the 14th century, which spread over almost the entire earth, wiped out 1/3 of the world's inhabitants in 4 years. That's what he wrote. Yeah, that's some terrible shit. So in 1347, comets appear. This is why they were blamed. Comets appeared. And many people, not just one, many people reported cigar-shaped objects flying through the skies, dumping body parts, forest animal body parts that were stinking and putrid, onto the ground. And other people thought that the plague came from that. Some of these cigar-shaped objects didn't drop anything. They sprayed a mist and people got sick. That's terrible. So in 1347, the Great Black Death Plague reaches Europe and begins decimating not just the coast, but far inland as well. The historical view is that the infected rats and sailors brought it to Europe, but studies have shown that the Great Black Death may have been airborne, beginning in the Far East. Now, in my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, it is shown that ice falling to Earth from the sky has often contained biological or organic compounds, even strange insects. This is possible because the Nemesis X object was once encapsulated in a biosphere of water that turned to fractured glaciers. And when that world fragmented, these glaciers became orbiting cometary bodies. This is all you guys understand. I hold that the sky is simulated. Every bit of this happened in a real world somewhere else, not in our world. So, the Black Death was probably extraterrestrial in origin. It is this time that the Maya in Central America have vanished from the historical record. Mayan civilization broke apart into many subcultures spread abroad. That's interesting, guys. That's something that was so widely reported from China to Europe. But we don't have any records of what happened in the Americas because this is the 14th century. So we have we have this massive event that's dying off, and yet archaeologists are able to isolate that. Damn, we have this Mayan culture that just vanished. Well, it vanished at the exact same time that the Black Death plague was going on. So apparently, this was worldwide. This death toll. So we move on to 1 year later, 1348. The Black Death is still in full throttle. Another comet appears over Paris, France. A strange pestilential wind infects the island of Cyprus with poisonous air, and many died of asphyxiation. The anomalous nature of this plague at Cyprus was that it was attended with earthquakes. So we have earthquakes at the same time as a poisoning of the air. So these could have been trapped gases that were escaping. I don't know. By this time, 50% of Europe's population had died of the Black Death. From the east to the west, thousands died every day as the plague ran its course. Ibn Ayyas wrote that the plague killed cats, dogs, horses, camels, asses, birds, and even wild animals way out in the desert places. That's pretty strong evidence that this was airborne. Arabic chronicler Ibn Khaldun, 1332 to 1406 AD, wrote, civilization, both in the east and west, was visited by a destructive plague which devastated nations and caused whole populations to vanish. Civilization decreased with the decreased with the decrease of mankind. Cities and buildings were laid waste. Roads and way signs were obliterated. Settlements and mansions emptied. Dynasties and tribes grew weak. The entire inhabited world changed. It's a hell of a statement. 1 year after that was 1349. In 1349, the Jews of German-speaking Saxony are rounded up and basically banished, kicked out of the country. By this time, the Black Death had killed a third of England's population. Another good book to read. Jewish Supremacism is not the only one. You need to find a book. They're making them increasingly hard to find, but you need to find a book called March of the Titans. It is the year by year history of the Caucasian race. This is what the book is about. March of the Titans. It's not a book on white supremacy. It is a book that puts everything back into proper perspective. And what I mean is histories have been rewritten to where Europeans have been demonized to the point that they're not even given credit for all the institutions that they created in the third, second, and first millennium BC. The book March of the Titans puts all that back into perspective of what basically white folks were doing 4,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, and 2,000 years ago, before the captured operations that we know of as publishing companies began rewriting history. So 1 year later, the final year of the Great Black Death Plague, early in the year, it's gone. It's gone. It vanishes across all the continents. No more Black Death plagues. The scourge is over. And in the month of May, we have the Phoenix. It's the year 1350. So I only know of one reference to an object being seen in the sky. We don't have a lot of literary records for that period of time. I got that citation from somebody else. It will be published in my Phoenix thesis. Very, that's. I need to go ahead and get that out now that I got people writing books about the Phoenix hypothesis and shit. Need to go ahead and hurry and get that out now. So, 2 years after this, 2 years after this, 1352, the Yellow River in China floods the vast lowlands, washing away villages and farmlands, increasing disease during a time already plagued by epidemic and famine. This is on page 45 of the book 1421. 1421 is fantastic. It shows all the historical evidence that whole fleets, Chinese fleets, have gone out and surveyed Australia, the Americas. They even brought back maps and did all that stuff. 1421 is very interesting. It was written by an academic, and it's some profound, because the Western world doesn't like to acknowledge the fact that the Chinese were already here doing surveys long before Western European colonial period began. So 1353, the year after that, Christian Byzantines of Constantinople acquire military aid from the Turks in their struggle against the Serbian kings. Those Serbs were something else. Y'all remember the Serbian Croatian War in 1992? Was it 91, 92, 93, somewhere around there? 94? This was the first time the Turks had crossed the Dardanelles Strait in aggression against Europeans. And this invitation to the Turks would exactly, in 100 years, lead to the result, lead basically to the fall of Constantinople. 100 years before the Turks themselves took Constantinople, Constantinople asked the Turks for help against local Serbian kings. It was exactly 1 century, exactly 100 years. This was the same mistake the Briton ruler Vortigern committed when he asked the Saxons to come to Britain and aid him against the Scots and the Picts. It's the same thing. A local ruler basically asks for mercenary help from foreigners. The mercenaries come and help, but they see how good the land is, and they make preparations for a bigger invasion. Happens all the time. Happened all the time in history. As a matter of fact, if my memory serves me correctly, when Vortigern did that, he literally changed the course of British history, because it became Saxon. 1 year later, 1354. Oh, we got some interesting calendrics here. 1354. King Magnus of Norway sends out an expedition to map out the northern regions of North America. Exactly 138 years before Columbus' discovery on America in 1492. This is really 138 years before the mass exodus, the banishment of hundreds of thousands of Jews from Spain. One of those Jews who was banished was Christopher Colon. Christovel Colon. You know him as Christopher Columbus. Which a lot of you didn't know, is that he was Jewish, and he was expelled from Spain in his ship to go find America the exact same day that the Jews were expelled from Spain. So there's a lot more to the story of him leaving Spain. It wasn't just to go on a mission. He had to get out. Now, This Norwegian expedition across North America is known to historians as the Kensington Expedition. These men left a record of their journey and exploits known as the Kensington Runestone in 1362. I've seen it. Well, I've seen it in encyclopedia. The Kensington Runestone was found when an old tree turned over, and it was in the roots of that old tree. Kensington Runestone reads in Gothic runes that they had made it all the way deep into the interior of Minnesota, where Minnesota is, and they had been attacked by Indians, and now they're worried that there wasn't enough men to defend the ships back there because this land was populated after all. They didn't know it was populated. They got attacked by Native Americans. So the Native Americans probably didn't know what to think of them, since these dudes are in armor using swords and battle axes, and these are the type of weapons that the Native Americans would have never come into contact with at that time. So it's yeah, this is 1354 when these Europeans were surveying North America. The calendrics are interesting because this is the year 2800 after Exodus. This is 2,800 years, or 700 years times 4, since the Israelites departed Egypt and they went and surveyed Canaan. So this is 2760 years post-exilic chronology, when the Israelites divorced the Jews and went their own way. It's called the divided kingdom chronology. This is 2760 years, which is 552, a phoenix cycle times 5. This is also the year 2106, year of Rome. Remember, 2106 Anno Domini is the year 6000 Annus Mundi. It is the year of the return of the chief cornerstone, which is a part of the ancient Israelite religion, faith. So the calendrics are interesting. This is also 828 years Anno Domini, or 2 cursed earth periods of 414 years each. When North America is surveyed, these guys get attacked. So 2 years later, we get to 1356. So in 1356, the English defeated the French at the Battle of Poitiers, or I don't know how to say it, Poitiers. A major earthquake shocks Egypt, completely obliterating the last vestiges of the Pharos lighthouse. The quake dislodged some of the heavy, polished white limestone casing blocks on the Great Pyramid of Giza, massive 20-ton, mirror-smooth surface stones. Later, it was French mathematicians that determined it was exactly 144,000 of these massive blocks to cover the pyramid. The Muslim city of Cairo, a few miles away, is also damaged, and Muslim engineers begin removing the Great Pyramid's casing blocks to rebuild the government buildings and mosques in Cairo, but mainly they used all the broken rock and fragments as ballast for their desert roads. Construction is begun on the Mosque of Sultan Hassan. Blocks would continue to be taken from the site for 6 years. Herodotus, Strabo, Diodorus, and a host of other ancient authors all wrote about the original condition of the Great Pyramid. The famous Arab geographer Ibn Battuta, in this same year of 1356, wrote a book called Travels of Ibn Battuta. And in that book he wrote, "The pyramids and temples are among the wonders known since antiquity. They have been much spoken of and much studied in regards of their function and the ancientness of their construction. They have no doors, and we do not know in what manner they were built." He's admitting right there that all the ancient sources that he had access to, they still didn't know anything about those pyramids. In many old depictions of the end of the world by various cultures, there seems to always be related. It's always related, this concept of the Great Pyramid. So interestingly, the word apocalypse has a profound connection to the monument. The word apocalypse. has a profound connection to the structure of the Great Pyramid. The roots for apocalypse are Apo and Calyptine. The Great Pyramid does have a fascinating timeline encoded within it, which I've shown on my channel and my published books. Now, it's been the subject of a lot of my research in chronotexture. But this timeline was invisible because the pyramid was a secret and the internal chambers were unknown. Their measurements were always a mystery. Once the cover of the monument was removed, later researchers were able to discover many important secrets in the Great Pyramid, the principal geometric message of the Great Pyramid's 4 base cornerstones being one of them, discovered by David Davidson to be the year 2025, the final year of the Great Pyramid's geodetic timeline. So, the casing blocks that were on the Great Pyramid that kept anybody from seeing the substructure in this year began fracturing off from an earthquake. Muslims went ahead and sent engineering crews, demo crews to the top, and they just started breaking all this white limestone shell because it looked like it was fractured all the way up. They broke it down for building material, but they left the core blocks in place because those blocks are all glued together. 2.5 million limestone blocks glued together like one mountain. But the earthquake had fractured apart this outer casing. For however that happened. This outer casing was a different type of stone material, and it was polished laser smooth. When it fractured and they started breaking it down, as rubble fell from the top going downward, it would break apart more pieces, and more pieces they would just avalanche it. And as they avalanched all this down, they buried 4 of those casing blocks underneath all that rubble, and they never got them out. And it's the reason why we know for a fact that the Great Pyramid had these magnificent 20-ton blocks, because we found 4 of them under the rubble. So, apocalypse means to uncover, to see more, so more can be unveiled. That's exactly what happened with the Great Pyramid. An earthquake removed the cover so we could see within. And only because of that, the science of pyramidology began. And we were able to research this monument with more clarity and depth. So for such a thing to happen, it's very interesting that the calendrics also show that this was an important year. This is the year 2100 post-exilic, right here. This is the number, which is 700 times 3. But it's also 1400 years since the beginning of the Roman Julian calendar, which is 700 times 2. This was 2 years before the year 1358, when Muslims of Cairo completed the Mosque of Sultan Hassan, with the stone casing blocks taken from the surfaces of the Great Pyramid and redressed. That's interesting. Now, the following 2 years is the year 1360. The Jews have effed up again, and now the people of Hungary have had enough. And in the year of 1360, the Jews are expelled from Hungary. Remember, guys, every country that has ever expelled the Jews always swear vengeance against that country. And they always execute it. They're real good at that. So we get to the year 1362. And in this year, the calendrics are pretty interesting, but in this year, England, long under French influence, began opening parliament in English rather than French. English became basically the law of the courts as well. In this year, the Norse Goth expedition of King Magnus of Norway that set out in 1354. In this year, they finished surveying North America and they left the Kensington runestone. Unfortunately, we don't have anything, there's nothing else known about the story after this. We don't even know if they made it back to their ships. Here is an actual English translation of the Gothic runes that are on the Kensington runestone. 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians on exploration journey from Vinland westward. We had camp by 2 rocky islands on 1 day's journey north from this stone. We were out and fished 1 day. After we came home, we found 10 men red with blood and dead. AVM, saved from evil. AVM is an acronym for a god. AVM, saved from evil. Have 10 men by the sea to look after our ships. 14 days journey from this island. Year 1362. So that's pretty interesting. So Europeans survey North America. This is 6,600 years of the Anunnaki chronology, which is based off of 600-year periods. Therefore, this is 600 times 11 of the Anunnaki chronology. Remember, the Anunnaki were the Anuna. The Anuna were nothing but bearded, tall, white folks who came across basically a black-haired, black-eyed, olive-skinned people in the ancient pre-flood world who regarded them as gods because of their technology, not because they were gods. This is 5,400 years since the appearance of the moon, which is divisible by 600. The Anunnaki Ner period. This is 48 centuries since the appearance of Enki, the descent of the Watchers, what you know of in my research as the Gihon flood in 3439 BC. This 48 centuries is divided by 600. This is 42 centuries from the beginning of the Anunnaki dynasty, the first year of the 7 kings of Sumer on the Sumerian king list. Yeah, that's 4,200 years is divisible by 600, the Anunnaki Ner period. This is 36 centuries after the flood of 2239 BC caused by the Phoenix. This is 600 years times 6. This is 2106 post-exilic chronology. 2106 is the year 6000 of the Anno Domini, of the Annus Mundi system. It is the final year. This is a cross-calendrical parallel. This is the year 3000 from the prophecy of Ephraim made by Jacob in the year 1639 BC when he died. The prophecy of Ephraim was that Ephraim would establish basically the empire of adoption, North America. Ephraim was the final of those that came from Egypt that would have his empire. Ephraim stands for a people who are assimilationists that would adopt other people. This is what ancient Egypt was. It was cosmopolitan. Everybody wants to claim it for their race, but that's not how Egypt was. There were 2 Egypts. One was Comitian in the south. The other one was cosmopolitan in the north. This is where, and the north is where even the Old Testament says the Israelites occupied Goshen. That's northern Egypt. That's where all the pyramids were. The Comitian Egypt has no pyramids. They buried their pharaohs in the Valley of the Kings. Yeah, guys. Always 2 Egypts. And anybody who wants to say that there's 1 Egypt always has racial motivation for doing so. So the calendrics for that showing Anunnaki is just a Nuna. And the Anuna were Caucasians in the pre-flood world that had technology. They came up from their underground cities after the Adam and Eve reset. And the people on the surface world had survived through a different biosphere. They were small statured, small bones. They didn't grow facial hair at all. They had black eyes. They had black hair that was long and straight. And they called themselves the black-headed people. And to them, it was a signature of pride. Through all the Sumerian cuneiform texts we have, the Sumerians prided themselves as the black-headed people, and they regarded themselves as different and inferior to the Anuna, who in all the pictures of the Anuna show them as basically bearded Caucasians with lapis lazuli eyes. That's why all these busts from ancient Sumer had lapis lazuli in the eyes. It was the easiest way to find some type of ornamentation that was blue. So in the year 1368, so we have the Jews now expelled from like 4 different countries in the past 30 years. So, and they hold a grudge. They hold a grudge. Believe that. So in 1368, in this year, about 400,000 people drowned in China at Nanshang, signaling to the people that the mandate of heaven sought a change of dynasty. This is a very ancient Chinese tradition. When disasters happened, the Chinese people basically understood that the mandate in heaven had changed. Anytime the mandate in heaven had changed, that meant that the heavens disapproved of whoever was emperor. So the Tartar Mongols were ruling at this time. Angry also at the oppression of the Mongol Khans, Hung Wu and other Chinese dissenters organized a clever rebellion. Because the Tartars refused to allow the Chinese people to gather in groups and had confiscated all their weapons, the rebels communicated ingeniously through their ancient custom of passing their neighbors' fortune cookies at each full moon. Within the cakes were instructions to all the Chinese to rise up and slaughter the Mongols at the full moon of August 1368. This was executed and the Mongols were expelled, giving rise to the Chinese Ming dynasty. Mongol Emperor Tofan Timur fled the country, and the Chinese man Zhu Di assumed the dynastic name of Hong Wu. I'm sorry if there's any Chinese listening to me, but you're never going to get me to say these names. So another year passes, and a descendant of Genghis Khan called Tamerlane, assumed the title of the Grand Khan. He's the big cheese now. After establishing himself in West Turkestan, his Mongol armies enjoyed a brief spell of conquest from Syria to Delhi, that's India. But the empire was only but a year duration. The time of the Mongols is ending. In the very following year, now the people of Belgium have had enough and they expel all the Jews. Remember, guys, for a whole population to fucking rise up and say, hey, man, you know what, man, a whole significant area, it's like Texas. It's like all the white people in Texas coming together and you know, looking at the Hispanics or looking at the blacks and then just, you know what, by military force, by assault rifles, rounding them all up and just chasing them to the border. I mean, yeah, man. You know what it would take? Do you know what would it take? It would take years. It would take decades of abuse for that to happen. So yeah, we have these little historical anecdotes and records of Jews being kicked out of countries, and they're masters at making themselves look like they're the victims. But what did they do? Why have 5 European countries now, in a 30-year period, completely kicked these people out of their nations? What did they do? So that's in the year 1370, which is the year 2300, 23 centuries, 2300 of the divided kingdom chronology, which started in 931 BC when the 10 tribes basically of Israel divorced Judah. Now in 1378, Pope Gregory XI died and Pope Urban VI was elected to the Holy See. But discontent cardinals elected another man for the office who became Pope Clement VII, or the anti-pope. The papacy continued in Rome, but the anti-popes sat at Avignon, France, a controversy called the Great Schism. This dual papacy was maintained until 1417. That's a long time. This was 840 years after the rise of the papacy in 538. 840 years is 120 times 7. Remember, Noah was given 120 years to prepare for the flood. Moses was supposed to be 120 years when he died. 120 years is supposed to be a round, it's like an ancient calendar round because it was 3 generations. Each generation was 40 years. A 40-year period in the ancient mindset was a time of trial and testing. Anytime you see the number 40, it's in regard to someone going, or a country or a person going through a period of trial and testing. Now, a country or a person could go through a period of trial and testing 3 times if necessary, and that's 120 years. 120 was very significant. All throughout the Sumerian all throughout the Sumerian cuneiform, we find references to 260-year periods or 120 years being very significant. So that's what we have here. Also, it was also 324 years, or 108 times 3, after the division of the church in the year 1054. For those of you who don't know, the Roman Western, the Church of Constantinople, the Greek Eastern Orthodox finally broke away from the Western Roman Church of Italy, the Vatican. It broke away in the year 1054, which happened to also be the year that the Crab Nebula appeared because of a star that blew up. It was in the year 1054. So now we get to the year 1380. 1380 is 138 times 10 of the Anno Domini calendar. In our calendar, it's the year 1380. The Jews are expelled from Slovakia. What the hell did they do? What are those Slovakians doing kicking them people out? Got no business doing that. What happened? So, the Zeno brothers illustrate a map of an ice-free Greenland and an ice-free polar regions. What's going on here? How did the Zeno brothers have access to data that showed these areas free of ice? This is in the year 1380. This map would remain undiscovered until one of their descendants would publish the map in the year 1558. The map itself dated 1380. That's amazing. Where am I? 1380, 1558. I'm just curious, guys. I'm just curious. Something jumped out at me with that. 1380 minus 1558. 178 years. Damn. 178 years that map stayed hidden. Their descendants published it. So in this year of 1380 was made the Great Salisbury Clock, believed to be the oldest surviving mechanical clock in the world. This is, again, from Daniel Borston, the book called The Discoverers. As of the year 2012, when I wrote this, the clock is 632 years old. And interestingly, it is located in the Salisbury Plain where Stonehenge stands, an archaic megalithic astro-terrestrial clock. In my book, Anunnaki Homeworld, I show you exactly how Stonehenge worked. It is a geometrical geodetic clock. Yeah, guys, it's crazy. Man, this year is 138 times 10 Anno Domini. And amazingly, all clocks in the world will become useless in 2046 when the Earth adopts a new movement. Remember, in 2046, what happens? Nemesis X object. What does Revelation say? Day, night, the sun, the moon, and the stars will all be reduced by a third. That means a 24-hour day is reduced to 16 hours, and a 365-day year is reduced to 243 days. So all our clocks, all of our timekeeping systems will mean nothing anymore in 2046. That's amazing. So why is this important? Because the year 1380 is a number of the Phoenix phenomenon, 138 times 10, but it's a countdown of 666 years to 2046. Where have we seen this type of paralleling before? Oh, well, we've seen it in the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid was started. The foundation of the pyramid was laid. The pyramid shows calendars, as I have shown many times. But the foundation in 2905 BC is 666 years to the return of the Phoenix phenomenon in 2239 BC, which caused the Great Flood. Yeah, we got cycles and epicycles, guys. It never ends. So the Jews done pissed off everybody in Slovakia now. So in 1382, Englishman Wycliffe provides the first translation of the Bible in English, but from the Latin Vulgate, not the original Greek. This was 520 years, 52 times 10, 52 being the calendar round for ancient America, to the publication of the New English Version in 1902. Let me say that again. The first English Bible was published 520 years before the publication of the New English Version in the year 1902. You guys know what 1902 is. You've been following me for a while. So we get to the year 1391. All throughout Spain. Remember, we started this hats off presentation with the Spanish crown giving the Jews permission to tax people in interest 33.3%, but it wasn't enough for them. During a time when the Spanish people were hungry, it was famine, they turned around and held out, forcing the crown to allow them to charge 40%. Yeah, they did that. So it's no wonder that by this time of 1391, before I tell you what happened in 1391, let's see how long it took. This is just an exercise to see how long. I want to know how long it took for the Spanish people to be fed the fuck up. How long did it take? (1326). It took 65 years. 65 years is what it took. 65 years for the people to get fed up with paying 40% taxes or interest. Because in 1391, all throughout Spain, the people rise up and massacre the Jews. They don't even try to banish them anymore. They massacre them. 4,000 Jews died in the city of Seville alone. It is estimated that 50,000 Jews were slaughtered in Spain 65 years after they started this practice in Spain. The Spanish were having financial problems, And as was the situation throughout all of Europe, the Jews had had an international financial and banking network that was the source of all the discontent. Source material is a book called Christ, The Power and the Passion, page 95. Three years later, in 1394, Jews from Spain, having escaped the years before, find themselves again expelled from Spain. This time, also from France, as the French people rise up against the Jews and chase them out of their country. This is exactly 2,800 years after the Israelites settled in Argob and Bashan in Canaan. This is 700 years times 4 after the Israelites settled in Argob. Source material, Jewish Supremacism, page 199. 4 years later is the year 1398. In the year 1398, Mongol conqueror Tamerlane invaded India, nearly destroying Delhi. Tamerlane's capital city was Samarkand, now which was the new Samaria, founded and built by the descendants of the Israelites that came straight out of the Assyrian captivity in the 7th and 6th centuries BC. Samaria, you guys understand, Samaria was the capital city of Israel, not Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the capital city of Judah, of the Jews. Samaria was the capital seat of the house of Qumri, the house of Omri, the royalty of the Israelites. So, Samaria was, it was founded in 881 BC, Samaria. This is all interesting because now Samarkand is basically city of Samaria. Now, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote Conan, and the background to the story of Conan and all his travels was during the Tartar period, but a lot of the backstory happened in Samarkand in the stories of Conan the Barbarian. Also in this year, Prince Henry Sinclair, a Grand Master of the Knights Templar and veteran of the Crusades, whose family dated back to the Norman invasion of 876 AD, gathered 12 ships and voyaged to Nova Scotia in the New World. Many believed he explored North America, as did the Norse in 1362. Back on the continent, John Huss, a Czech, lectured profusely upon the doctrines and teachings of the famous John Wycliffe, the English translator and publisher who produced the first widely dispersed Protestant Bible, to the indignation of the Roman Catholic Church, who proclaimed Wycliffe an enemy. Look at that. The Pope doesn't want you reading the Bible. He just wants you to donate to the church. At the University of Prague, Huss delivering a fascinating discourse on the beliefs of Wycliffe that resulted with a rash of popularity in the educated classes on Wycliffe's and Huss's beliefs. This was 84 years after the church and French king roasted Jacques de Molay alive, the Grand Master of the Templars, in 1314 AD. This was 24 centuries, or exactly 2,400 years after the throne of David was established in the year 1003 BC, according to the Jewish chronologies. The Templar data comes from the book Pirates and the Lost Templar Fleet, pages 148 to 159. And the information about Samarkand and John Wycliffe comes from A Short History of the World, page 202. So we arrive to the year 1400. We now arrive to the 15th century. In the year 1400, a metallic meteorite crashed into the region close to Elbingen, Bohemia. When it was found, it still weighed 235 pounds. This is the approximate date for the burning times in Europe, when the agents of the Roman Catholic Church searched the countries for forbidden books and confiscated them, tortured, and then burned those who were caught with them. This is really interesting to me because we have the printing press about to just mass release all these books that were scrolls and handwritten. So it seems like the church was already preparing for that, trying to get rid of a whole bunch of material before it could actually reach the presses, basically knowing the direction of events. I don't know. I could be speculating. So in the year 1401, the Mongol leader Tamerlane, he was called Timur the Lame, but that's Tamerlane. He conquered Damascus and had a pyramid built of 50,000 human skulls of those men that the Mongols had killed there. Timur the Lame's capital was Samarkand, New Samaria, and he would go on to conquer cities and nations from Siberia in the north to India in the far south, the Middle East and the Hellespont, to the very borders of China. Timur is described by the Arabic Muslim writer Ahmed ibn Arabshah as tall, mighty in strength, white in color, with a long beard, lame in his right side, powerful in voice, brave and fearless. This is an Arab historian who wrote about one of the Khans. Guys, I tell you all the time, our history books have been rewritten. Many people have thought that these Khans were Mongol just because it was Mongolian empires and stuff. Listen, guys, there are too many historical references that the Khans were like Vikings. They were like big, huge Caucasian bearded dudes, and that the principal soldiers were all white. This is like ancient Russian Cossacks. It's a this isn't a yeah, our history books have given all this credit to Mongolia and that the Mongols were, yeah, the core armies of the Mongols were Oriental, they were Asiatic, but all across the central Eurasian steppes, those were all Caucasians. So that's 1401. That would have been a terrible sight to see. 50,000 human skulls, a pyramid of skulls. I have seen it though in a video game. So in the year 1402, do we have anything happening in 1402? Europeans record the appearance of two bright comets in this year, and Jacobus Angelus of Ulm, that's in Germany, wrote a detailed treatise on one of these comets. 2 years later, in the year 1404, Emperor Hong Wu of China, remember he was one of them that organized the revolt against the Mongol Khans, and how they revolted exchanging fortune cookies with instructions on the revolt inside the cookies. Emperor Hong Wu of China has 2,180 scholars begin the Yongli Dadian project to preserve all the known knowledge and texts of the East. I like this guy. It would take almost 16 years to complete the 4,000 volume Chinese encyclopedia. That's amazing. It's amazing. By 1420, they would be done with a Chinese encyclopedia that was 4,000 volumes. That's incredible. 1408, the king of Hungary, named Sigismund von Luxemburg, reforms the Societas Draconis. This Order of the Dragon was essentially reborn from a more ancient fraternity of kings and nobles. Vlad Dracula, was of this order. Interestingly, this is when the Societas Draconis was restructured. It's much older. And in this year, this was exactly 666 plus 666 years after the start of the Indian Saka calendar. It's also 2160 years of the year of Rome. Remember, we're told in the houses of the zodiac, each house is what? 2,160 years. Calendars, guys, they always intersect at really unique events. So in the year 1409, Chinese navigator Cheng Ho directed a fleet of the largest seagoing ships ever constructed until that time, save for the Ark of Noah. As far as dimensions go, the Chinese fleet sailed to Ceylon in the Indian Ocean, and the Chinese erected an upright slab inscribed in 3 languages commemorating the visit: Chinese, Tamil, and Persian. The Chinese imperial policy was to parade the wealth of the empire and exhibit its magnificence rather than dominate over its satellite nations. That's amazing. In this year, Korea published its first text using movable type. This is the predecessor of the printing press. Right before the start of the printing press. So I did skip over some events, like in 1400, Tamer the Lame devastated southern Russia and invaded Syria. Then in 1401, he stormed Baghdad, butchering about 20,000 people, many being Christians. Yeah, I skipped both those events. Tamer the Lame was going off. But that's probably another reason why the Khans got such a bad rap in history, though. It wasn't for the conquering. It was that the Jews had no foothold in the hierarchy of the Khans. See, there were Jewish politicians, Jewish scribes, Jewish tax assessors, bankers, all throughout Europe, all throughout the Middle East, all throughout the Mediterranean, all into ancient Iran, Persia, all going into India. They had things covered. They knew all Northern Africa. They had the information sewed down. But when it come to the Khans, they were unpredictable, and not having Jews in the positions they needed to in the hierarchy of the Khans, who were violent and had a different type of culture. They didn't trust. They didn't have taxes. They didn't have any use for any people for which the Jews would provide service. So this made them very unpredictable and feared for that reason. So we have a period of history now that's going to get amazingly rich, event after event after event, starting with 1414 AD. 1414, 1415, 1417, 14. It's getting deep between what's going down in Europe, the Khans, the Christians, the Arabs, the Turks, the Jews are everywhere. This is our next video, guys. And I'm going to do the next video either tomorrow or the day after, because I need to release another video to make up for this distance, guys. You're getting another hats off video either tomorrow or the day after. And we're going to go, this is where it gets really high octane. Oh, we might even get as far as Christopher, so you'll know all about the true Christopher Columbus and what really happened in 1492. Yeah, they covered all that shit up, said the man discovered America. I'm going to show you otherwise, what they really covered up. Yeah, man, that's where we're going. Hope you enjoyed this presentation. It's been 1 hour and 34 minutes. Guys, it's hats off. But I promise you, tomorrow or the day after, I promise you, before this month is over, you will have a third hats off video. Peace out. I got things to do.